Wanted to take today and address a topic that is common with pretty much everybody in some way, but as it relates to prison and the dynamics of prison, um, especially when it comes to the dynamics between um, the incarcerated individuals and the staff members, and that is trauma and PTSD. And so, as it relates to prison and incarceration, uh, when you're traumatized, parts of your brain are stressed to the point that your mind does not detect when the danger is over. So, any new experiences are seen through the lens of that trauma and likely perceived as another threat or danger. Okay, and I'm not a doctor. I have no degree in psychology. I do read a lot, so do your own research on trauma and PTSD. I'm sure some of you have. So take this with a grain of salt, but wait till the end of the video, and then you can let me know if you think that this makes any sense. So when it comes to the prison environment, a prison is a place designed to keep people locked in. There's no escape. Everything is controlled, which means that you are not in control. So everyone there is fighting over control because people don't want to be controlled. So when it comes to the incarcerated individual, the one who is the offender, the one who is the inmate, they have undoubtedly been through all kinds of various life circumstances that have resulted in trauma. Instead of seeking mental health treatment, the vast majority of offenders have self medicated through substances or relationships or disassociation and also control, and many of whom have never come to the realization that they need treatment or that the threat, the danger that their mind detected at day zero when they first experienced trauma, that threat has moved on. So they're reliving every day through the lens of that trauma. And it's similar with institutional staff or the officers that those individuals who staff a prison have also experienced their own traumatic events, in a lot of cases similar to those that have been experienced by people who ended up in prison. And similarly, also, a few of them have sought out therapy or treatment, and these individuals may also cope with that trauma in the same ways as offenders may have, and also in ways that aren't necessarily illegal in nature. So that is another reason why you have a kind of a distinction amongst people that is exaggerated when it comes to prison, because you have a very clear line, and I am on one side and you are on the other. So now you take both of those groups of people and you put them in an environment that is a symbol of control, and we expect the ability to control that environment to be automatically deferred to the ones wearing the badge, because a badge is a symbol of authority. But that expectation is often unrealistic and unreasonable, because the offenders who are incarcerated in the facility have undoubtedly been abused and traumatized by other figures or symbols who represent authority or control in their life, like a parent, like a family member. Being taken away from your family to be incarcerated is a trauma in itself for the offender and for their family. But since both the offender and the offended and their families are traumatized, neither party can properly discern that the event is over unless there is counseling and therapy to walk them through, is as often the case in a criminal case with the victim. So the offender continues from that day forward in their traumatized state, having an already improperly functioning brain, and cannot truly process that the incarceration is a result of their actions. They can only perceive it as a threat, which disables them from learning the consequences of their actions, which is the definition of rehabilitation. Because the brain is operating under the threat, which rules out the ability for healthy, logical reasons. So they're not able to put a person who is traumatized and who is still experiencing the danger and the threat of that trauma, and then are placed in an environment where they're expected to learn a lesson. That's not a reasonable expectation, because in their brain, the learning capability is severely diminished because they're still living under the threat of the trauma. So without healing from the original trauma, the incarceration and separation from the family feels like a continued threat. So every day that you wake up in prison, because you're seeing everything through the lens of something that might have happened to you when you were 7, appears like a continued threat. So you automatically, the normal person, a healed person, wakes up at a zero threat level. But in prison, just because of the environment and because of the people who are there, the level of threat that you're already automatically at as soon as you wake up is a 10 out of 10. Not because there's actually any danger, but because your brain is perceiving it that way. So the fighting that ensues in prison is not always between, cops and robbers. It's two similar groups who are both fighting to maintain control because of the things that happened before both members of those groups even got to the prison in the first place. And the danger in the environment is multiplied because people from either group rarely do people from either group recognize that they are not processing their reality correctly because they're processing it through the lens of their trauma in their own minds they're the ones that need to be changed or healed, but that's what they both have in common, is that since they both brought trauma to the table, obviously what needs to be at the table that they've both been brought to is also the healing and the restoration so that they both can be compatible in an environment that they're both in. So, how do we do that? That's the big question. How do we do that? Well, I have two ideas, but I'm not going to get into them today. I'm going to bring them to you on Friday. So, I'm sorry to do that to you, but you're going to have to wait until Friday. I'll see you then.